October 25th, 2020, time index 12:46 p.m. Sunday afternoon. To Professor Jeffrie Ahmad. Hi, Professor. How are we doing? I hope that you have received my email regarding the Liberty Kids special. Things like this actually do happen to relate with the material that we've been covering in American literature. And I'm hoping maybe you'll be able to keep this in mind the next time you actually have an American literature class, that a suggestion to the classmates, either this one and the future ones, that they can watch this Liberty Kids special. I had sent letters over to my history and political science professors because this also relates to their topics as well. Since we were talking about slavery and we were talking about injustice, and not to mention the current mental states of the people in the colonial and pre-colonial times, I thought it was important to offer this one to the classmates, just if they want to watch it under their own power, and if they want to take notes, that's fine. I'm deep into the series. I mean, this is about 40 or 48 more episodes of this remarkable series that lasted for maybe about a year or less. It was under the PBS stations back in 2003. I was trying to write before. And in understanding American history and American values, and not to mention the writers of the literature, it's pretty fascinating seeing it, well, I would say it dumbed down a bit, but I find it pleasantly enjoyable. And it happens to deal with the works that we have in the book right now, even with a couple of authors that we've mentioned, including Miss Wheatley. It also happens to deal with some of the historical figures that I've learned about regarding Western civilization, not to mention U.S. history and California history, not to mention political science. This relates to Professor John Vento, political science, Professors Jeffrie, Kenneth Schaefer, and David L. Lewis. Because growing up, I had taken classes in high school concerning about American government. But I went in one year out the other year because we were teaching it that way, and it was taught by rote. And the same thing applied for U.S. history and world history. But there was no context. There was no context given to us because we didn't have the formulas. We didn't have any ideas what the hell we were studying, except stuff we had to do by rote in order to pass tests left and right. And this was back in the 80s, when I was going through junior high and high school. Elementary school was barely understanding history, if we actually had any. Reading, writing, arithmetic, and if we're lucky enough, history of California or history of the United States, but just went over because I know a young mind is very impressionable, but the problem is, as I said before, context. Even a young, impressionable mind would have a hard time with that one, Professor. So, in watching the Liberty Kids, I wish this thing was back in the 1970s and 1980s, because I would have been under the impression of what it would have meant under a kid's point of view. And even watching it as an adult, decades later, it's still quite relevant in how we look at our country, how do we look at the literature, and how we look at our people, and what's been going on these days. I'm hoping maybe that it says a suggestion will be made to the class and future classes that they can watch this remarkable series on YouTube. But they also have very expensive DVDs out there on Amazon and eBay. Believe me, I checked on that one. It's quite free on YouTube, even if you like commercials left and right. If you happen to get YouTube Prime, it costs you a bit, but you get away from the damn commercials. I'll stick with clicking off the commercials. I'm cheap. But I just wanted to let you know what was going on. During this weekend, with all the political muckranging and political headbanging going on at this point over here, Professor. Even the article that we have right now as it is pretty much heavy enough as it is. But in watching Liberty Kids, it's helped me understand more and more about the writers and during that time period. I've had explanations coming from Professor Lewis and Professors Schaefer and Jeffrie, but not enough of a context I can actually take a look at. So, I was watching this series throughout the week. Just about finishing up the end of this week. And then I'll be able to maybe understand a little bit more what we're talking about in the books. Yes, we've talked about history. We talked about Black History Month a few times in different history classes. But, said before, there are different things, different contexts you have to understand, different viewpoints, in order to get the general lay of the land even worse than what you already knew, or should I say even better, depending on your point of view. You can think that it's all mumbo jumbo and everything else, but frankly it's not. It's very enlightening. It's entertaining, a bit dramatic. I don't know, it's a cartoon. I like cartoons. I grew up under cartoons, from the 60s and 70s and 80s. I watched all that junk. Cartoons changed back in the 90s, couldn't deal with them. And then afterwards, what cartoons? Some I could deal with, but nothing to open up a mind, nothing to open up history or life or anything else relating to it. Or even putting things in a dramatic fashion that you would understand why we struggle in more ways than one. So I'm hoping in this fashion, what they've been trying to teach us, maybe that has some kind of relevance. There are several chapters in the series I'm watching that actually do have certain relevance to the information that you're presenting to the class and the other professors have been presenting. I just wanted to point that one out, and I will see you in class Monday.